topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Who is January Jones? She is not a young, beautiful, talented actress on Mad Men. She is not an older, gorgeous, exotic dancer from the Johnny Carson Show. She is an author, and she wrote Thou Shalt Not Whine, the 11th Commandment, that reached #1 at Amazon.com. She is a reality TV golf personality with World High Stakes Golf televised on HDNet. She is a humorist and winologist expert. She is your featured host today on January Jones Sharing Success Stories. So sit back, relax, and get ready to laugh and listen to Ms. Jones with her eclectic roster of guests as you learn life's lessons. These stories plus sharing equals success. Welcome, and remember, beware, because you are entering the no whining world of January Jones.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a glittery and glowing day. I'm January Jones, and I'd like to welcome you to our podcast today. I'm so happy to announce I've created a new brand recently, Glitter Granny Gifts. I've now become an associate affiliate at Amazon in order to share with all of you other seniors who love to shop my glitter hats, my jewelry, my collections of canes, so many other things, along with my assistant Golden Doodle ginger ale. You know, this past week was a big birthday weekend for me. I'm now officially 81. Oh my gosh, yes, that's a big one for me. All of my kids came to celebrate with us. And as you can see, they've added to my bling. And it's been wonderful having them with us. Remember, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that bling. Now start to get ready, every other granny out there, to glimmer and shimmer with me today and every day. Go to our website, start shopping, and subscribe with us at glittergranny.com. Now for my listeners, let me ask you a question. Are you a senior? Well, technically, anyone over 50, according to AARP, is a senior, and a lot of people are soon to be seniors. Are you ready to become successful? Are you ready to try something new? Would you like to go on an enchanted journey today with us? Are you ready to meet someone who can share his personal success story with us today? Would you like to know how he did it? And more importantly, why he did it? Now, let me ask you, have you ever heard of a book called The Enchanted Passenger? Well, I've just read this book, and you'll find this book on the front page of my website. I was so impressed with it. You know, I don't even have my own books on the front page, so you can tell I really like this book. As to my questions, if you can answer yes or maybe, then you are in the right place. And I'd like to welcome you to January Jones Sharing Senior Success. Now it's time to rest. Go get some wine, get some cheese, find some crackers, and join us in the no wine zone. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. He will share with us how to become successful despite discouraging odds and surviving economic and emotional storms along the way. He has interviewed over 7,000 of the world's top thought leaders to find the common threads among them. That's a pretty impressive number. My multi-talented guest is the author of The Enchanted Passenger and many, many other books. It's my pleasure to welcome to our show today, to our podcast, Corey Piorier. Hi, Corey.
January, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to have you, and I hope I said your name right, Piorier.
Yeah, you did. That's
Okay.
I mentioned off air. That's as good as I can do, maybe a little better.
Piorier, is that a French name?
It's very French, and the other side of my family is Doucet, which is as French, and I can speak about this many words of French.
Okay.
I'm only partially being sarcastic in the sense that I can probably say about 8 words. Like I can say salle de bain, and I pronounce it really flat, which is like, I think, where's the bathroom? And then
Okay.
I say, je m'appelle Corey. Yeah, my name is Corey. That's about all I got.
Oh, okay. Well, I kind of figured you were French because when I was in Catholic elementary school, one of the little boys in our class, his name was James Fournier. And once I heard his name, he was so cute. I knew you were going to be wonderful. And I had a feeling you were going to be French. So let's talk a little bit about your success story, where you were born and who your early influences were.
Yeah, so I guess if I start with where I was born, I grew up and was raised in a small town or city. It was a town at the time in Canada. It's basically in the smallest province in the country. So it's called Prince Edward Island,
Okay.
and
Oh,
and
yes. I've been
yeah,
there.
so it's a small little place called Prince Edward Island. I always say it's like Hawaii 8 months of the year, and then like Alaska 4 months of the year. Uh,
Yeah.
so pick your poison, I guess. But I mean, it really is a gorgeous place. Like right here in my office, I'm looking at it's the waterfront, ships coming in.
Mhm.
It's in the summer. I mean, there's a beach every 10 minutes. So
Okay.
it is a cool little place. But I grew up in this small town. I was raised by a single mother, barely graduated high school. I got a 49 plus 1 in a class that I needed a 50 in, meaning the teacher allowed me to legally graduate. I didn't know the difference between fiction and nonfiction when I graduated, and I didn't read my first book until age 27. So that's kind of a little bit about my origin story and where I've kind of started.
Okay, that's fascinating. Not knowing the difference between fiction and nonfiction. Wow. I personally, I love nonfiction, and actually, all my books are nonfiction. But this book that we're going to talk about today, The Enchanted Passenger, that is definitely fiction. And share with us how you were inspired to write this book. Actually, how did it all come about for you?
Yeah, I mean, if I go again, there's real sort of long story, short story. So I'll go more of the short route. But essentially, I had asked this question literally thousands of times in interviews. Now, here's the interesting part. People could figure it out by doing a bit of digging. I don't want to share the question because it reveals a big, I'll call it a big twist in the book. So,
Okay.
but the question, I started thinking, what if that was a book? Like, in other words, what if this question was a book? And that's kind of what stirred it in my head. And then I sat with it for quite some time. I didn't write a word for a year, but I had the idea. I knew that I knew the ending from the minute I decided on the idea. Then I knew the beginning shortly after, and then I started piecing together the middle. But I kind of just came up with different concepts and ideas and decided it would be set on a plane and things like that before I ever wrote a word. And then
Mhm.
about a year later, we went on a family vacation to a cottage,
Okay.
and my wife said, you're not as big of a swimmer as us. Like the kids have become swimmers. She
Mhm.
is. I was born on an island, and I've never learned to swim. And so I love the beach. So I would sit on the beach and read or whatever while they were swimming in that.
Right.
And she said, if you're going to be like, you're not going to come in the water with us anyway much. So what if you were to work on that book you keep yapping about? That was basically it. And so
Okay.
that would be a good idea. So when I say that, it was like whenever they were doing stuff that normally I wouldn't do anyway, why
Mhm.
not work on the book? And so at that, it was 2 weeks we were there. And by the time we left, I had about half the book written.
Oh
And
my,
but
wow.
then nothing happened again for like 6, 7 months. And then I would start hacking away like 5 pages at a time. Like it really took about a year to a year and a half
Okay. Yeah.
to write the book. And so now we're 2 years in from idea to finally writing a rough draft. The interesting part is that part, some would call that slow, some would call it fast, depending on their perception of slow and fast. But the interesting part is from that point, once I had a rough draft until I held the book in my hand was only a year. And that's with a traditional publisher. So normally, even if you had a book that was already on the market and they decide to buy it, unless it was already selling, 1 million copies a week or something crazy, normally they would tell you it's going to be 2 years before the book's back out. So the idea of my book being out a year in my hand from rough draft is very abnormal. But I went to a publisher that I'd worked with before, and I said, here's my business and marketing plan for the book. And whether, if you guys publish it, that's awesome. If you don't, that's cool too. But no matter what, the book has to be out by this timeline. And the timeline was like 4 months later. So that's a quick timeline.
Oh, I know.
They gave me a timeline and said, like, I had to have the final edited version in, I think it was within 30 days of when I asked it, 4 months. So everybody was working quick. And then we put the book up for pre-order on April 1st of this year. Okay. And so to be honest, when I told them when I wanted to have the book online and when it was up was all in 2024. So everything I just told you happened about in this year already.
Wow.
And the book hit the market, quote unquote, on June 25th. So I know your question was more about what inspired the book, but basically it was that question. And then I said, how would that play out in a plane? And then what I did was I created two characters, younger person, old person. They sit next to each other on the plane by chance. The younger person is a business owner who thinks he knows, or a salesperson who thinks he knows it all. The older person is a consultant, wiser business person who knows a little more than the younger guy. And then essentially, reluctantly, because he wants to learn how the older guy made money, he listens to him. But what he learns is how to become a rich person through 10 life lessons that the older gentleman had learned during interviews and time he spent with a lot of thought leaders. So I will tell you, January, it's a Hollywoodized version of my life. And so I'm a part of both characters. I was the younger character when I was younger, and I'm maybe closer to the older character now that I'm a little older.
Okay. Well, I'll have to share with you something. Also, I've written 6 or 7 books now, and I know what you're talking about, the long process. And most books worth a darn take 2 to 3 years to get out there. It's nothing overnight, but yours sure came along quickly. That's amazing. And I was drawn to your book. We're airline people. My husband was an airline captain, and I was a stewardess many, many years ago. And your book just spoke to me because it's a lot of things that I'm going through in my life right now as I've turned 80. And some of the same things that young people go through, seniors go through. And it's always very, very challenging. I just loved your book. I just couldn't put it down. And as I said earlier in the introduction, I'm even selling it for you.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I have your book posted on my website right on the front page. And I also am encouraging people to go to buy it at Amazon. And speaking about promoting your book, I also want to promote my new website right now.
Welcome to Glitter Granny Gifts to Give or to Get. Hosted by January Jones, aka Glitter Granny, and her golden doodle ginger ale. If you're a granny who wants to glitter and glow, it's time to join us for a sparkling shopping experience that will be unique and so very special. Whenever you need a unique and spectacular gift, then Granny will help you find it. Along with gifts for family, friends, and holidays, there are even glitter gifts for coworkers, in-laws, doctors, and you can even find something for your friend who has everything. If you need a really good gag gift, you'll find it here. Hats, canes, shoes, accessories. When it comes to glitter accessories, Granny and Ginger Ale are on board with everything you can imagine, and then some more. The favorites are at her website. And remember, she is adding to this list almost every day with lots of fun gifts to give or to get. Granny has created a website that is glamorous and glows with glitter products to wear or to use every day. As she says, if it ain't got bling, it doesn't mean a thing. Now, let me tell you about her glitter hat collection. She actually has too many to count. Her collections are must-have accessories for any glitter granny who enjoys getting attention everywhere she goes. Remember, if people are going to stare at you, make it worthwhile for them. And canes? Everyone will ask you, where did you get it? Can I get one too? Now, just go to glittergranny.com and check it out.
Welcome back. And now you know what I've been up to in my spare time. And any granny out there who wants a cane, I can tell you I recommend these highly. Also, you can buy Corey's book right on the front page of this website. Corey, I've done my plug. Could you share with our listeners your website and how they can follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best website, probably because we were talking a bit about the book, I would rather probably give people the book website. And so it's pretty easy. It's thisisthebook.com. And
Okay.
I will say, January, people can get it on all the stores and all the usual places. That just happens to be the site that we set up for the book. So either works.
Okay, well, I'll be selling it at Amazon, and I hope we get a lot of people anxious to read it. And the reason I want to sell it personally and recommend it personally is I finished reading it. And we talked about in the book, you shared with us the 10 rules to becoming rich. And these rules are for becoming rich in many different ways, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this wasn't intentional, I don't think. I mean, it may have been, but it wasn't planned, I guess is the way I'll say it. But for me, these lessons were learned during my interviews with many of the world's top thought leaders. And learned during one-to-one interviews. And so how I looked at this book is, what are the 10 things that if I were locked in a room with my kids for 24 hours, but that's all I had left to share what I've learned over the years, what are the 10 lessons that I would share from the interviews I've done with my kids? So that, I mean, just to give some, I guess, backstory or context to the lessons. But to answer your question more directly, for the most part, most of them aren't directly about how do you become financially rich. But in my experience, if you follow a lot of them, abundance will follow. And so when I say abundance, I still do mean monetary, but I also mean just abundance in your life, like drawing stuff to your life. But it's just important to note that and I'll tell you where that came from, but the core focus is around what would make me a richer person and what is the things I wish I knew before I started my journey. But I think where this sort of came from, this idea that, and it's even called The Flight That Changes Everything, and starts out with the idea that Robert wants to learn how to become more wealthy. Even though he's making good money, he's spending it as well. He wants to learn more of that. And because he doesn't get it's about how much you keep as much as it is how much you bring in. But he's all about the money. And then he only listens to Treb because he thinks he's going to learn how to make the money. Well, honestly, I didn't think at the time, but I probably pulled a lot of elements into this book from other areas. So where I think I pulled that from unconsciously is how Think and Grow Rich, which was the book that changed everything for me by Napoleon Hill. You know, they say over 100 million people have bought that book. Probably 300 million have read it. And the thing about that book, which I find fascinating, is when he launched it was during the Depression. So it's, of course, a great idea to call a book, How Do I Get Rich During the Depression? Because everyone wants the money. But what I found interesting is once you dug inside that book, especially for being written in 1937, when you dug inside that book, you realized, maybe not right away, this book isn't about becoming financially rich at all. This book is about becoming so rich that you're going to create abundance because you're doing what you love, you're doing it in the right way. And so he teaches you how to become abundant but he tricks you in with the idea of becoming rich. And so with the book here, I almost took that in a meta way, the idea that Robert thinks he's buying the Think and Grow Rich book, which is I'm going to learn from this older guy who's going to teach me how to make money. But what he's really buying is what Think and Grow Rich really is, which is about how to become a richer person overall.
In every way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's where that kind of came from. And I drew from there, I believe, as inspiration. I will say a little fun fact for listeners. If they've heard of the book Think and Grow Rich, it would be probably a good trivia thing, but I don't want to hold people up that long. So I'll just tell you the answer after I share this. But a lot of people don't know what Think and Grow Rich was originally called. So Think and Grow Rich wasn't the original title for the book. Have you ever heard this? You probably don't know the original title.
I haven't heard this, hon.
Most people haven't. So the original title for the book was How to Make a Boodle with Your Noodle.
Oh, how perfect for that time in our country's history. Oodle, noodle. And of course, now I'm playing off that I'm using my doodle in all my promotions.
Well, and you probably know, a lot of people wouldn't know, like I just barely caught this from my grandparents and stuff, but the term boodle meant money. But it doesn't today. Like nobody uses that word today. So the interesting part is his publisher didn't want the title. And I think they were right, because that would have been a great title at the time. And at the time, it would have been the same title as Think and Grow Rich, because it basically is saying how to make money with your head, which is Think and Grow Rich. But because of today, I don't think the book would have lasted, because the term isn't used anymore. So it's kind of over how
they could bring it out again and throw in the oodles and the doodles and the poodles that are just taking over every advertising. That's why we're using my dog in my advertising, because everyone loves these little doodle dogs. Let's talk about rule number 1. And this is a rule that I have lived my life by, and it is listen basically to your intuition. Share rule number 1 with my guests.
Yeah. So, I mean, people have different, intuition, of course, is a part of it. I mean, it's, you get this hit and what do you do with it?
Yeah.
We call them all like God winks and nudges. And the term I use in the book is synchronicity. The reason I use that term is, and these are, what people know as coincidences, but I'll explain a different way to view that. But why I took that approach was because I did some work with a gentleman named James Redfield, who wrote the Celestine Prophecy. And that book was really the book that introduced or made the term famous, synchronicity. So I felt I needed to pay homage to that. And in the book, the character talks about how he sat next to James on a plane. And so I kind of shared what I learned from James myself, but through the character. And because of that, I thought I should stick with the term synchronicity. Having said that, there's synchronicity, I think, is part of the intuition side of things. So basically, a synchronicity is something you see happen and go, wow, there's meaning to that. Some people would say, I see 12-12 every day, or, oh my gosh, I see red cars all the time. Whatever that looks like, you'll hear people say, I can't believe my mother loved butterflies, and this day I was struggling with her death, a butterfly came and landed on my nose. That type of thing. But the interesting part is, I think they're two pieces. So that's the synchronicity. That's the thing that happened. Your intuition is, what do you do with that nudge? Like, what do you actually do now that what's my intuition telling me to do now that I've seen that? So book, we talk about both, but I focus a lot on how to draw more synchronicities into your life, because I believe either A, when you acknowledge them and say, I want these, the universe gives you more, or B, when you acknowledge them, you see them more often. I honestly don't know, January, which of the two that really is, but I don't care, because all I know is I get more of them. Basically, the coincidence aside, for people that struggle with this because they think that's just a coincidence, what I would suggest to them is, instead of using the term synchronicity, God winks, or whatever you want to call it, why not use the term meaningful coincidences? Then we don't have to argue over whether or not it's a coincidence. Let's both call it a coincidence, but let's say this one has meaning to you and this one doesn't. And I think that way we can get away with debating whether or not it's really a coincidence. But, and Les Brown, the great speaker orator, said to me that synchronicity is God's way of staying anonymous. Cool to kind of look at the concept of synchronicity. It's like these things are happening for us. I believe it's like that whole statement, is it happening to you or for you? And I think synchronicity is proof that the universe is doing stuff for us. So in the book, it's basically what it teaches you is that synchronicity can be a real thing if you believe it is. And if you want to bring more of them into your life, you need to acknowledge them. And then we go into a bit of detail, like the fact that I have a synchronicity journal, which is where I write down the things that happen. And then I find I get more of them that way. And then we also talk about how you can act on them. So if you see a person 3 times, 4 times, maybe you need to ask them what message they had for you.
Yeah. And I always refer to that as having the universe will take time out and speak to you. And sometimes if you're a little slow, they have to do it over and over and over. Now, your second rule, I really can relate to: enjoy the journey and the destination. Now that my husband and I are just into our 80s, all of a sudden, this has so much meaning for us and for a lot of our senior listeners. And it's also such an important rule in that you talk about random acts of kindness. And this is something so essential to happiness, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point about the idea of enjoying the journey, where this came from, for me at least, is and it is a big thing. And even in the book, I didn't cover this enough, meaning eventually I may write a nonfiction book just about this alone. But it's the idea of, well, I call it next. So it's this idea that so many, and here's the interesting part, so many thought leaders that we look up to and say, I want to be like them when I grow up. And these people that are helping lots of people, impacting lives, doing amazing things. I get to interview a lot of them. And so many of them, they are always thinking about what's next and never enjoying the what's happening now. And so what I mean by that is it's much like the person that buys the boat and then the day after says, maybe I bought the wrong boat. And they think it's the bigger boat that's going to make them happy. So they buy a bigger boat and it doesn't work, a bigger boat or a bigger car or what have you. And so that's the next thing. But it even, here's what I find fascinating. It even happens with the achievement type things. So for example, me holding a book in my hand for when I was writing it earlier in my life. So the reason I spotted this is because I was doing it. So earlier in my life, it was all about when the book comes out, I'll be happy. When the book I'll have this excitement. It's like speaking on the senior side, how many people say, when I retire, then I'm going to start living. What? Like what if every day until then? And sadly, how many people do we see pass away not long after retiring? I think because even if they hated their job, it was a purpose they had to go to every day.
Right.
So, having said that, what this argument is, I'm making the argument for in the book, is what if really the journey is the destination? So what does that mean in the real world? What it means is, instead of the destination being the book I'm holding in my hands, what if the journey was coming up with the idea? What if the journey was writing the book? What if the journey was talking about the book on shows like now? What if the journey was the interviews I did to get the insight for the book? And I could go on and on. But my point is, what if during that, all those things, what if the journey was, what if that's also the destination? So whenever I do this interview, what if I could be fulfilled by this instead of waiting till the book's out? What if I could be fulfilled by sending the book to the editor and getting their feedback versus just holding the book in my hand? So what this does for me now is I have a whole bunch of little destinations. And I can actually be happy in the moment versus waiting until some far off point that usually doesn't happen. And why I said next is because here's the part that's interesting. When this occurred to me was when I finally held the first book that I was waiting for in my hand, not this book, a previous one. And I went, that's it? Okay, now I didn't even sit in it for a minute. And I thought I was abnormal, but I noticed when I interviewed thought leaders, most of them did the same. And so I'm starting to advocate for, instead of trying to change that, maybe that's the way I'm built. Instead of trying to change that, why don't I just start figuring out how to enjoy the other moments? And I will say, I interviewed a guy named Dr. Nader, who was, he actually had the torch passed to him from the Maharishi. And so this guy's really studied happiness, fulfillment, what have you. And he told me in all the studies they've done, they discovered that humans mostly, for the most part, aren't happy unless they're always chasing something new, like another carrot. And so that put it in my head that, why am I trying to force people to be happy with the destination? Maybe the happiness is the chase.
Yes, absolutely.
This is the chase. So the journey, you could use a different word and say the chase. So what if the chase is where it's at instead of the catch?
Yeah. And then I think as people get along in life, they start to realize what you're saying is so true. And, just like you, I have a book coming out this coming week at Amazon. And the interesting thing about my book is I thought about this book 30 years ago. And the publisher, I wanted to call it Dying Without Whining. And the publishers, several of them, no, 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 it's too depressing. No one will ever want to read it. So I changed it to Thou Shalt Not Whine, the 11th Commandment, which went to number one, interestingly enough, in religion and humor. So now, fast forward 30 years later, I still wanted to write that book. So I created a new title for it, and it's called Living Without Dying. 80 years of magical moments.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Introducing Living and Dying Without Whining, a memoir. 80 years of magical moments, written by January Jones. Ms. Jones shares her most exciting and magical moments. Patriotic moments. Landing on aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson. Staying overnight, then catapulting off. Revealing moments. Working for the CIA for 5 years. Thrilling and comforting moments. Meeting Charles Lindbergh and Neil Armstrong together. Sassy moments. Swinging 60s and the 70s. The age of Aquarius. Exciting moments. As a TV contestant on Joker's Wild and Family Feud. Reality moments. Playing in the World Series of Golf on reality TV. Career moments. As a stewardess for Eastern Airlines. Touching moments. With meeting a half-brother she never knew about. With many, many more magical moments. Living and Dying Without Whining. A memoir. 80 years of magical moments. Written by January Jones. Available at Amazon.com and Audible.com.
Welcome back, Corey. I had so much fun writing my book. When you get to be my age, the best thing about it is you can say or do anything you want.
I've heard that.
And what I'm realizing, I'm going to have you back, because I think the way this show is going, we're only going to get through the first 5 rules that you've created. And number 3 is no to things that won't move the needle. Oh my gosh, what a good rule that is.
Well, so thank you, first of all, so much. And I will say that, people ask me often what, in terms of what one do I want to pick, what one do I want to talk about? Like if they only have time, let's say to talk about one rule. Mm-hmm. This one is the one I've been using as a go-to for a while now. I think and the reason is it's one of the ones where I believe all of these you can see quick results with them if you start applying them to your life. But this one is very particular because some of the other ones, like some people might struggle in one area, but they really do enjoy the journey. The one we talked about, like some people are just happy all the time. Yeah. But this is the one, a person can be happy all the time and also a people pleaser and also struggle with overwhelm because they say yes too much. And so this one here was fascinating for me how I learned it, because when I was younger, my grandfather, carpenter with a grade 3 education, built a fiberglass space shuttle replica to scale. I looked up to him my whole life, and he was like a father to me. And when people say, who is the wisest mentor you had, I cite him often. However, having said all that, he lived a different life than me. So he was a carpenter. He worked locally for clients, and they would say, can you do this, Eddie? And he would just say yes to everything because he felt that was the way to keep clients happy, is to always help and go above and beyond. Now, they loved him. They weren't asking him to do anything unreasonable, but they would say, Eddie, while you're here, can you also do this? And he'd be like, yep. Like, he never said no. So he always said to me, not always, but he said to me at times, say yes to everything, and that'll treat you well in life. And so that was kind of what I went out with.
Right.
Now, sometimes we forget that's wise advice if I was following his career path and his life. But it depends on your life. It depends on your friends, because you might be that yes person, but you might have friends that take advantage of that. So there's a lot of variables you have to factor in. And then I'll tell you what compounded it more, January, is I heard this quote that was misquoted, like paraphrased by Richard Branson. And it said, say yes to everything and figured how to do it later. So then I'm like, now I'm really perplexed because my grandfather said it. And now Richard Branson, who's juggling 200 and some businesses, is saying yes to everything. I'm like, what am I missing here? And then I found the original quote, and it said something to the effect of, say yes to everything you love. Figure out how to do it later. And those words were pretty significant. So that's one thing. And then on top of that, I started doing all these interviews. And over again, not only were people telling me that you need to say no more often when you get busier, but they were doing it to me. So I was seeing, like, I was getting rejected, meaning I was trying to get interviews, and they're like, no, sorry. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm watching it happen. They're saying no because they can't take on everything. And right now, I'm not a good fit. And so I started analyzing it, and I noticed it was one of the common traits that the top achievers had in common is they said no like 20 to 50 times more than the average person. So I need to start practicing it. But why I think it's such a significant one is because a lot of people don't practice it, and a lot of people feel guilty with the idea of even saying no. So what I tried to start doing is learning how you could say no in a way that wouldn't burn a bridge, and how you could even figure out what a yes and a no is. So in the book, we talk about the importance of writing a personal mission statement, because when you know what your mission statement is or what your mission is, even if you're a parent, stay-at-home parent, when you know what your mission is, you know pretty quickly what a yes and a no is. So if you say, I want to be the best parent in the world, and somebody is trying to convince you to leave your kids and go help them move a couch and leave your kids at home alone, and your kids are 6, well, you know pretty quickly that goes against your mission. So it becomes an easy no. So one thing is, when you have that dialed in, then you quickly start seeing yeses and nos. So like mine is to be the guy that motivates, donates, educates, entertains, and inspires. And so if people ask me to take on something, if it's only 3 of those, or 2 or 1 or 0, it's an easy no. If it's 4 or 5, it usually is an easy yes without regret. So having a mission statement allows me to figure out quickly what a no and a yes is. But then on top of that, how I say no without burning a bridge is, I learned this from Chalene Johnson of Turbo Jam fame. And when I interviewed Chalene, she was busy. She had 600, I think, locations where they're teaching Turbo Jam across North America. And the ones that were local, they would ask her to fill in for their classes, and she was too busy. And so she kept saying yes. And then eventually she realized she had to start saying no, because this is something I learned long ago, is everything you say yes to is a no to something else. And so she was saying yes to it, which means saying no to her family. So she started telling me, look, we're a very family-oriented company. I need to ask my husband, Brett, if we have anything in the go before I say yes or no. Is it okay if I get back to you in a couple of days? And if I can't do it, I'll find somebody else to help you. Well, how do you get mad at somebody for that? So she would do it, and she would say 90% of the time when she got back in 2 days, they're like, oh, never mind, I already figured that out.
Okay. That's so true. That's so true. Oh my gosh, yeah. And that's actually how I'm back doing podcasts, TV podcasts, because I had gone on hiatus, and then the pandemic came, and I was like everyone else, letting my hair go natural. Found out it was white. Wow. And so then the pandemic was over, and I thought, gosh, I really enjoy talking to other people. I enjoy sharing stories with other seniors. So it was easy then to say yes to doing this. And your number 4 rule is one we live by every day. It's live every day like it's your last, but not plan like it's not your last. And when you're 80, most days you think are your last. So it's an easy one for us to do. But for younger people, that's a little more difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, and this not necessarily why I put it in the book or where it came from for the book, But there's a great quote by Gandhi that says kind of what you just said. Live like every day is your last, but prepare like it's not, essentially, in a nutshell. And so that's kind of the approach I took, which is that what if, I'll even pose ourselves. So this is the exercise you could do. Pose the question to yourself. If it was my last day, and then make a list. What are the things I would do on that last day? And then obviously you're not going to do a Groundhog Day and try to live that exact same day every day. But if you have a list of 15 things you love doing and that you would do on your last day, why not try to do one of those every day? So that's an exercise. But it is the question of, if it was your last day, and I recommend people make a list or sit down and say, what would I do on my last day? If I only had one day left. And what we can talk to this, because I kind of build on this with the idea of the mayfly. And I can't remember if it's the next chapter or which lesson it is, but I'll add to this. So I'll say the mayfly. I never thought in a million years I would name a title of a chapter the mayfly. And this isn't related to the boat that existed, I think, called the mayfly. This is the actual little fly. And where concept came from for me is I was watching an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, just as background noise. And I heard the older brother, I think he's older, but Robert said something about the mayfly and how short it lives. And anyway, and I started researching it, and I was fascinated because the male mayfly lives 24 hours. And so all it does during that day is live on purpose. It just does whatever its purpose is and then finishes its day. But it's doing what it would do on its last day. But then I'll add in this, but I knew this wouldn't work, is then I found out the female mayfly only lives 3 to 5 minutes. Her whole purpose is to give birth to other mayflies. But having said that, I knew I couldn't say, what would you do in your last 3 to 5 minutes? It's too short a time. So I chose 24 hours. But this really ties into what we're talking about. So live like the mayfly. Figure out what you would do. It only has 24 hours. It lives on purpose. What is your on purpose for those 24 hours? And then if you can figure that out, incorporate some of that in your day, and I think you'll have a bigger smile most days when you wake up.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of smiles, that's one of my mantras. And I think when we were talking about random acts, I also suggest everyone smile randomly at everyone you see coming and going. And guess what? It's contagious. They'll smile. You know, my book that's coming out, basically I wrote it for my children, but mostly my 7 grandchildren. And you talk about mindset is everything. And I think the theme throughout my book, Living and Dying Without Whining, is if you think it, you can do it. Yes.
Yeah, it's I love that. There was a quote, again, you can tell probably I'm a fan of certain books, but there was a quote by Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich. I think it's probably one of the most famous quotes from the book. And you know, I love how, like Jack Canfield from Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Yeah,
I do different teachings, and then my friend Tiffany was a train the trainer with Jack, and she's like, "Oh, Jack does that," and I never knew he did it. Like it's wild how we come around to similar things, which that's why I call one of my talks the timeless secrets of influential leaders, because it's timeless. Like what Napoleon Hill taught in 1937, I'm still figuring out and learning today. And the same things he discovered. But one of the quotes he had that I thought was brilliant. It said, now he said man, because sadly in 1937, it was always men quoted, only men. But he said, whatever the mind of the man can conceive, and I'll say, and woman, whatever the mind of the man can conceive and believe, he can achieve.
Oh, yes. Oh,
and so, I mean, and it works female or male. But that quote, when you said that, it makes me think of that quote, because I do believe that I'll say it this way. I don't believe, so this is going to be a unique thing to say, but I don't believe in absolutes. But whenever we say all things are possible, I believe almost all things are possible. When we say nothing's impossible, I believe that almost nothing is impossible. The reason I say that is I think when you use an absolute, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be wrong. Like if you say nobody likes this show, well, obviously more than one person's watching it, it wouldn't be on the air. So, but people do that all the time. They'll say nobody, everybody. And one of the other ones is nothing is impossible. Well, yes or no. I mean, I can argue that, not including astral projection, but if you're standing in front of me right now, I can argue there's zero way that you can jump from your feet up to the moon and come back down again in 1 second. So far, that hasn't been proven possible. It may be possible someday, but that's why I say I do believe there's a few random things that aren't possible, but I believe for the most part, if we can dream it up, we can believe it.
Yeah. Well, I found from in my own life that something that I thought was impossible became possible. Even at 80, I've been able to lose 30 pounds this year.
Oh,
Wow, what a change in my health. And then you talk about will it matter in 5 to 10 years when you're making these decisions about what to do or what not to do. For us, it's will it matter in 5 or 10 months. It's a shorter period, much more intense.
absolutely.
And you also suggest taking a news detox. That is such a good suggestion for everyone.
Yeah, well, I mean, to tell you the news detox, but I'll also add to what you just said as well. I frame that will it matter in two ways, though. The other way I frame it is this stuff that you're worried about now, like the stuff that you're losing sleep over. If you can you honestly sit there and say in a year, you'll still be losing sleep over the same thing.
Right, right.
If you can, maybe explore it further. But 99% of the time, what you're dreading today won't matter in a year. A lot of times it won't matter in a week. But
Yeah.
you're for lack of, this is a bad visual probably, but Michael J. Fox, I remember I always love this quote. He said, when you're worried about tomorrow and yesterday, and you have 1 foot in tomorrow, 1 foot yesterday, you're really peeing all over today.
Oh, that's fabulous.
I love that idea that because that's what we're doing. So the point is, I use that two ways. One is what you're worried about now, will it actually matter in 5 months, or 5 years, or whatever that timeline is for you? The news detox came about because my mother was diagnosed with cervical cancer a number of years ago, like almost 20 years ago. And she went to see her doctor after she was diagnosed, and he wrote on a prescription pad in front of her, just like doctors do, handed it to her, and it was folded up. She never looked at it until she got to the car. We figured we're going to have to go to the pharmacy to pick up something. She opened it up, and what it said on that prescription pad with the doctor's name was, don't watch and read the news anymore.
Okay.
So that's where the idea came from. So then she went back and asked him, and he said, I found that my patients that don't watch or read the news as much have a better chance of conquering cancer. So then what I said to my mom is maybe we should go on a 21-day news detox then. And we tried it 21 days, and that was 20 years ago, and we haven't stopped yet. So we're on almost on a 21-year news detox now.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. I wish more people would think about doing that. You know, we're coming to an end, and I'm enjoyed having you so much, and I'm going to enjoy promoting your book. Also, we've only covered 5 rules. So I would like to officially invite you back again, maybe next month or down the road, because we've got 6 through 10 to discuss. And I feel like we're pretty much on the same page on a lot of our rules of life. Don't you agree?
I would agree. And January, I'd like to, so I would love to accept that. And I'll follow up with you off air, but we're doing a book club next month. It's free, completely free. That might be something cool you might want to check out, or you might have people that say, hey, I want to check it out. But what we're doing is we're doing a free night. I think it's September 26th, 2 hours. The first hour, we have Dr. Joe Vitale, who's going to be on, interviewing him, what have you. And then we'll go into breakout rooms and talk about my book. Then we're going to come back. And then the top of the next hour, we have Marcy Shimoff, Happy for No Reason. Yeah. And then we're going to go for another half hour and talk about my book. So it's going to be like a true book club, but also an event and completely free. So anyway, since you know the book well, you might want to come and check that out.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I'd love to do that. And I hope my listeners will. Thank you for everyone joining us. We hope we've been informative and inspiring no matter what age you are. Signing off, January Jones as the Glitter Granny now. Be sure to glitter and glow until we meet again. Thank you for entering the No Wine Zone with us, and share our stories with everyone you know. And remember, if you're going to make people stare at you, you might just make it worth their while. Give them something to see. Now, thank you again, Corey, and I look forward to having you back with us soon. And to my listeners, take care and stay safe until we meet again.
We want to thank you for listening to January Jones Sharing Success Stories. Always remember Ms. Jones' personal mantra: If you can think it, you can do it. That's what all of our guests have done with their lives, and so can you. You are the ultimate success coach in your own life. All you need to do will be to start sharing your own story with your family and friends. We hope that our guest stories will encourage you to explore an equation in your future that will combine your creativity plus connecting with others will enable you to be successful too. Always remember, your passion plus your purpose will equal prosperity as you explore the wonderful world of January Jones.